You have the English Yerushalmi? Oh, nice, nice. We are, just for us to get our bearings, we're on Yud Ches Amid Beis, and what we were talking about last week, the last thing that we left with was um, the Gemara says that you have to have specific kavana to understand the words that you're saying for the first paragraph of Shema. But for the second paragraph of Shema, lechatchila you do, of course, you're supposed to have kavana for everything that you say. But b'di'evid, even though you didn't have kavana, you're still yotzei. So the Gemara had asked the question, what's the difference between the first paragraph of the Shema and the second? So the Gemara had answered that they really thematically are exactly the same, or not exactly the same, but they're close enough. They basically reiterate the same themes of accepting the yoke of heaven upon yourself, to love Hashem, to commit yourself to Hashem, and and to tie these things on your heart and on your mind, etc., etc. So the Gemara says, well, then why do you have to say both paragraphs if they're identical? And the Gemara answered that the first paragraph was written in the singular, the second paragraph was written in the plural. And that seems to indicate that a Jew has to always view himself both as an individual and as part of a polity, as part of a national entity, and therefore those are different personas, I suppose. And then the Gemara had given a second answer that the first paragraph of Shema is more of an intellectual commitment, and the second one is more of a physical commitment because the first one deals more with mental attitudes and commitments of my mental processes to Hashem. And the second one talks specifically about Ula Avdo, to serve Hashem by actually performing the mitzvahs. Okay, now to continue this discussion, so there's another opinion. The first opinion that we saw is that you have to have kavana in the entire first paragraph to know exactly what you're saying. But Bar Kapora Amar, Ein Lecha Tzarich Kavana, Ela Lishlosha Psukim Harishonim Bilvad. You only need kavana for the first three psukim, which is, what are the first three psukim? Now, it's Shema, the Ahavta, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchusa Le'olam Va'ed is the second. The Ahavta Es Hashem Elokecha B'chol Levavecha U'v'chol Nafshecha U'v'chol Me'odecha. Those three, you have to have specific kavanah. Now, is that how we paskin? No, that's not how we paskin, but it is an interesting shita because apparently those contain the most important parts of the Shema. Now, Vitani Kain, and we have a brisa that seems to support this, because the pasuk says Vishinantam, so Adkan lekavana, Mikan va'elach lishinun. So what is the first pasuk that comes after Al Livavecha? Vishinantam Livanecha. Give it over to your children. Teach it over to your children. So the brisa says, up until that word Vishinantam Livanecha is a requirement to have kavana for those verses, and Mikan va'elach, but from that point forward, Eino Elo Lishinun. It's only for giving over the text, but not that having kavana is absolutely necessary. Now, before we go any further, I should point out that there is a third opinion that is brought down by the Bavli that we do not have in the Yerushalmi. And that is the only time that kavana will be ma'akev, meaning that you won't fulfill your mitzvah, is only for the first pasuk of Shema. Now, where is this brought down? This is brought down in the Shulchan Aruch itself, and that's how. So I therefore just think it's just important for us to see just that very short halacha in Shulchan Aruch, so that we understand what the origin of this is. I mean, we're seeing the origin, but we don't really see in the Yerushalmi the formulation of the halacha lemaisa. So it's in Siman Samech Gimel, Sif Dalid. The Shulchan Aruch writes, "Ikar hakavanahu ba'pasuk rishon." The main place of kavana is in the first verse. Hilkach in kara velo kivein libo b'pasuk rishon. Therefore, if a person recited the Shema but didn't have kavana in the first pasuk, lo yatsa yedei chovato. He has not fulfilled his obligation. V'chozer v'koreh, and he has to go back and recite it again. Va'afilu lemanda omar mitzvot einan tzrichot kavana. Even according to the opinion that says that you don't have to have kavana with intent that I'm fulfilling this mitzvah, even though normally that's not going to prevent the mitzvah from being fulfilled. But here, modehacha, that opinion will acknowledge that here is different. Here there's a mental kavana, not just that I'm doing a mitzvah, but that also I have to know exactly what I'm saying. Because inherent, and just to read you the Mishnah Berurah, because inherent in the mitzvah is to accept the yoke of heaven upon you, right? How can I accept the yoke of heaven by saying words that I have no idea what I'm saying, right? So this manifests itself in Jewish practice. Number one, we place our hand over our eyes so that we can block out anything, any vision that might distract us. And also, if you notice, we take a little bit more time to say that first verse of Shema because we want to make sure that we're covering each and every word, that we know exactly what we're saying. And as the commentaries point out, there are specific things that we're supposed to be thinking about when we say Hashem, when we say Elokeinu, and when we say Echad. So just to read for you the Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah says that later on, that previously we had taught that Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed is also necessary. Vimlo Kivein, and if a person didn't have kavana for Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed, he would have to recite it again with kavana. So that's equally going to be ma'akev. It's going to require me to say it again. Lo yatsa, you haven't fulfilled your obligation if you didn't have kavana. Afilu im kodem shehitchil likrot nitkavein lekayem v'hakriya hamitzvah saseh dekriya shema. Even though I knew when I was launching into this recital that I'm going to fulfill this mitzvah of Shema that God commanded me to fulfill twice daily, that's not enough. Mikol makom kol shebe'emtza pana libo lidvarim acherim. But if I turned my heart to other things while I'm actually reciting it, harei lo kibel alav malchus shamayim baskamas alev. I may be intending to fulfill a mitzvah, but the mitzvah is accepting the kingdom of heaven upon myself. And if I'm not thinking about the kingdom of heaven, then even though I'm thinking I want to do a mitzvah, it's like I want to do the mitzvah of shaking a lulav. And then I walk away and I don't pick up the lulav. It doesn't matter how much kavana I had to fulfill the mitzvah. If I didn't pick up the lulav, I didn't pick up the lulav. In the same vein, I want to fulfill the mitzvah of Shema. But what is the mitzvah of Shema? Accepting heaven, the yoke of heaven upon yourself, accepting God's mastery upon yourself. If I'm not actively thinking that, it's like I didn't pick up the lulav. And therefore, if I said it without that kavana, I have to go back and recite it. V'chozer v'korei b'lachash. But, says the Mishnah Berurah, you have to recite it quietly to yourself. Why? Shelo yihiyeh nira kimakabel shtei reshuyos chas v'shalom. Because if a person says Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad twice, it may have the appearance, like we'll learn later in the Mishnah, as if you're accepting two deities upon yourself. There was a great fear of dualism, of worshiping dual deities. And this is historic because in the times when the Gemara was being written, and we're living in the Middle East, one of the popular religions of the time is Zoroastrianism, which its remnant still exists in Iran today, which is Zoroastrianism is, and its later offshoot called Manichaeism. These are religions that believed in um, two deities that are in constant conflict with each other. And so you have to make sure that anything that you do in Judaism is not in any way going to arouse suspicion that maybe you believe in two deities. So if you said Shema out loud twice, you might be a little bit in trouble. Okay, vafilu im kvar kara kol parsha Shema v'hayim shemoa. Now the Mishnah Berurah goes really far in this. He says, let's say, and he's quoting the Magen Avram, let's say a person already recited all of the first paragraph, all of the second paragraph, v'achar kach nizkar shelo kara pasuk rishon bekavana, and then he remembered, you know what? I've been in outer space for most of this, and I don't even think I had kavana for the first pasuk either. Does that ever happen? Nah, that never happens to you and me, right? So tzarech lachzor v'likros kol parsha Shema. He says you'd have to recite the entire first paragraph of Shema. De'im lo yikra rak hapasuk harishon harei havikari lamafreya de'ena yotze kidol lekamon b'simin samach dalet, because then you're reading it out of order. So you have to go back and at least recite the entire first paragraph. V'im niskar be'emtza parshas v'hayim shamoa yigmor ad vayomer v'yaslo v'yikra shema ad v'hayim shamoa v'yachzor leparshas vayomer. Let's say you remember and you're in the middle of v'hayim shamoa. So then, and you realize I didn't have kavana. I've been in outer space this whole time for the last 10 minutes. So finish v'hayim shamoa. Then go back to the beginning and say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, the whole first paragraph, and then finish with Vayomer Hashem al Moshe Lemor. In other words, the sequence of the three paragraphs is you're allowed to go out of order, but you can't do the psukim within the paragraph itself out of order. So therefore, if you missed saying Shema correctly, you got to say it together with the whole paragraph of the Ahavta, etc., etc. Ukshartam los al yodecha ve'elus v'nechu savtam al mezuzos beisecha u'visharecha. Okay, and okay, all right. So that's the Mishnah Berurah on this matter, and so I just wanted to show this that there is an opinion in the Bavli that's not brought in the Yerushalmi. That is how we paskin, that it's not necessary to have kavana for the ahavta, even though, as we mentioned, the lechatchila, like the best way to do it is to have kavana for every single word, every single pasuk. Okay, let us go on. Any questions or comments before we continue? Okay, there's another halacha regarding kavana. Rabbi Chuna, Rabbi Uri, Rav Yosef, Rav Yehuda, B'Shem Shmuel. All of these sages, quoting, going back to the name of Shmuel, Tzarech lekabel olav malchus shamayim mu'umad. A person must accept upon himself the yoke of heaven while he's standing. Now that sounds bizarre. None of us do that. None of us stand up to accept the yoke of heaven upon ourselves. And furthermore, didn't we learn previously that according to Beis Hillel, you're not supposed to stand up in the morning, only according to Beis Shammai. So, what does that really mean, says the Gemara? Im haya yoshev omed. Does that mean that if you were sitting down, you have to stand up? That's a question. So the Gemara says, Lo, im haya mahalech omed. It means if you're walking and you realize it's time for me to say the Shema, you got to stop everything you're doing. It's not necessary to sit if you're in the middle of traveling, but you have to stop moving, and stop everything you're doing so that you could muster the proper concentration. And okay, so yes.
Sometimes maybe it's a self-consciousness or whatever, but if I'm behind the kehila and they're already into their amida, So, is there a problem with me sort of standing and like the rest of the Kahila and just doing the Shema? What, because I'm behind them. Instead of sitting down, it looks like, I'm not part of the.
It's not only appropriate, but sometimes it's necessary. So, for example, if you're in the middle of davening and you have to catch up to the Amida, and you're in the middle of a group of people and everyone else is standing and doing the Amida, Derech Eretz requires you to stand up so that you're not sitting in front of another person while he's davening the Amida. Absolutely. It's not just if you're in the back. If you're in the back, it's less problematic. But if you're in front of someone, then you have to stand up. Okay. Yeah, we'll have to hold it here for today. Davening's at 6:30. So we'll, Emirz Hashem, continue tomorrow. Have a great day, everybody. Chodesh Tov.